Going, everybody? It's your guy Wardy, and we're back at it with the latest Big Mets update segment here for a second consecutive night. We're back at it for a live edition instead of a short and condensed version, as we have done in either a typical post-game coverage and then I crop it out and post it early the next day in the morning, whatever it is. Tonight we have a lot to deep dive in this one, as there are endless scenarios in which the Mets can make and the Mets can miss playoffs. In tonight's show, the whole point of this discussion is to break down to an absolute T how insane this is for the Mets, how much this should have been avoided, as we know, but ultimately what exactly are each and every path leading to the Mets to hopefully crack postseason play. A lot's going to transpire from now up until Monday. Will the Mets even play those games Monday? That is still a question mark, and we'll find out given how the next couple days go for the Mets, the Braves, and the Arizona Diamondbacks. But should the Mets play a game this Monday? Yes, you heard this correctly, Chris Sale might just be the opponent there for the starting pitching. Is that good? No, it's not. For all the Mets fans out there saying, Wardy, rejoice, we're going to miss Chris Sale, we're not going to touch him. Well, Brian Snitker is going out of his way to do everything in his power to potentially make Chris Sale available on Monday while risking hurting the Braves in the long run there on potentially still missing postseason play. That and more is what we're going to deep dive, along with the complete series preview on this Mets versus Brewers matchup, which officially begins tomorrow, in which we will have pre- and post-game coverage for live on the WardyNYM platform. But before I get into anything else, I want to thank you all so much for everyone chiming in live on a replay. I greatly appreciate that. You guys were unbelievably toxic in the chat I saw to begin the live show. Saw a lot of guys saying, oh, Wardy's late. Yes, I was late, and yes, I went in hand with changing the diapers. Literally just got back from dinner, as well as I was feeding my son while actively at dinner there as well, which held up time a couple minutes. We're here, though. We're live, and we're breaking everything down here in Mets land. We see my man Tyler as W. Thank you for spamming those W's in the live chat. We appreciate that. No more spam is needed, brother, but I appreciate it no less, and because of that reason, that is exactly why the messages have now been deleted. So no more spam there, my man, but we appreciate the support no less. Martin, how are you? I love Jose Iglesias. No name. Michael, hope everything's great on your front. Ghost Away, great moderator, how are you? Daniel Castellano, how are you? Michael, going up the list. Jack, Scott A, Chalk, how's it going? Ian Smith, how you doing? Martin, Malone, who's always talking shit, how you doing? Jesus, Harold, great member, how are you, my friend? Hunter, Pat White, great member. Thank you, everyone, for chiming in and live on a replay. There we go, just messing with you. I love that. You guys crack me up in the chat. My man Ricky, who definitely wants to hear before the end of the live show our post-game theme song, so we might just have to do exactly that if Ricky stays all the way chimed in until the very end. But I just want to ask each and every one of you watching live on a replay, can you guys please let me know what is your temperature level right now? How are we feeling heading into tomorrow's matchup? The Mets not playing games for back-to-back days feels absolutely like a sin, especially when they're about to have the gauntlet that they're going to have starting Friday. Should they crack postseason play, they're going to have to do a lot of traveling in a very short period of time and a lot of games, a lot of things going against the Mets right now, sadly. But one thing that is not going against them right now, at least, is this time off. They are officially in Milwaukee. They landed early this morning, according to Anthony Como there of the New York Mets on the beat for MLB.com. And the Mets, who have had all day to kind of rest up, get adjusted, are not beginning their game until tomorrow evening there against the Brewers in Milwaukee. So Francisco Lindor, who's expected to return, will likely be starting batting leadoff at the shortstop position yet again, and then we will see how the rest of the lineup looks from there. Sean Manaea will be the game one starter of that series, and we will deep dive a bit more on that matchup and all my kind of thoughts on not only the pitching matchups for every single game from Friday, Saturday, Sunday, but ultimately what the Mets need to do to secure a series victory against the Milwaukee Brewers, and what should we look out for from Milwaukee's side of things, if anything. And this one is what we're going to deep dive here in a second right now. But I want to know how you guys are feeling. Do you have a frustration level right now? Are you guys content with the current status of the Mets right now? As we see, they are sadly not playing games for a couple days, but hopefully things work out in their favor in the end. That's all we can knock on wood for and hope. Can the Mets call up Brandon Sproat? I mean, technically can they? But yeah, Brandon Sproat isn't pitching again this year. Brandon Sproat was shut down purposely by the Mets before the AAA season ended because he already hit his innings and he's already had more than enough work done. Brandon Sproat is not going to be a call-up for the Mets, even as potentially that extra man there for Monday's game, because I'm going to go on a limb and say the Mets are not going to throw out a rookie pitcher and potentially a do-or-die game for them to end their season and dictate if they crack postseason play should the Monday doubleheader happen. So no, that is not happening. To the initial chat that we had here in the live show, people say that, oh, Brandon Sproat's getting the call. No, he's not getting the call. There's been nothing to confirm that, and I firmly believe that will not be happening from now until the end of the regular season. Eddie Alvarez has not been the corresponding move either, so again, that was just a bunch of nonsense that someone threw in the chat, probably just for the sake of stirring the pot before the live show actually started, to which I say I respect it, and let's now break everything down in this one. Okay, guys, let's talk about it. Who do we call up then? You figure it out. You call up a starting pitcher they have that you've just had in the minor leagues at the moment, or you consider a bat. Obviously, you're going to go with an extra arm, an extra pitcher there. So the Mets will likely go for a guy that, you know, if they have to defer to, then okay, they'll do. But Brandon Sproat isn't at the top of that list, or otherwise they wouldn't have shut him down the way that they shut him down this season. I don't see that happening until proven otherwise. Oh, Emerson, happy birthday to you, my friend. Very happy birthday to you. Happy to hear that. Hope you're having a fantastic rest of your day. I know that the Mets are not playing tonight, unfortunately, but hopefully for the sake of you can enjoy your evening without the stresses of Metropolitan baseball that happens every single night. No less, hope you're having a great evening, my friend. Thank you so much for being here. I would like 3 more straight 10-plus run Mets games. I mean, yeah, I think we all would have liked another 3-game heater of exactly that. And Milwaukee as well would be brilliant, considering that this Mets team has been absolutely horrendous in Milwaukee for a good stretch of time now. But all right, guys, let's get into everything on this one. There's a lot to break down here, and there's a lot that I really want to deep dive. So as we currently look at the wildcard standings from this beautiful graphic made by our amazing editor that's in the live show as well, and Jacob here has the Mets currently tied with the Arizona Diamondbacks for that wildcard spot. AZ did sadly win yesterday, but the Mets still have the tiebreaker between the two. They're 3.5 behind the San Diego Padres and just 1 ahead of the Atlanta Braves. My question, each and every one of you watching live at a replay, is as follows: where do you feel the Mets will be standing come postseason play by this weekend's end heading into Monday? Do you think that they will have clinched a spot? Do you think they're on the outside looking in? Do you think that they're going to still be in the same position as they are now? Whatever your thoughts are about that, let us know in the live show and the replay and comments down below. Thank you so much for doing exactly that. But let's get today's conversation started with what I was initially thinking heading into the day, because as soon as I woke up today and got on X, the first thing I saw flooded on my timeline was exactly what I expected, because we were all going to talk about it on the off day. How are the Mets going to go about not only their pitching configuration, but how is everything matching up now for them to crack postseason play? Because there's endless scenarios. And I want to give a massive shout out to a couple respective X pages here for each and every one of you that really highlighted beautifully what exactly is going to be happening with the Mets for their chance to crack postseason play and the amount of games that it may take for that to happen. You know, what is their lucky number, if you will. So we're first going to shout out a good Mets follow and Benny Greenberg. Benny, who's a big time Mets fan, has been talking about them plenty on X past couple of years, and he tweeted this earlier today, and this is accurate. So for the Mets, for their chances to clinch playoff spot before the Atlanta Braves doubleheader this Monday, these are the following scenarios that we could find ourselves happening. Mets wins plus Diamondback losses equals the magic number of 4. 3-0, meaning the Mets need to sweep the Milwaukee Brewers, and the D-backs just got to go 2-1. Why? Because the Mets have the tiebreaker against the D-backs, so it doesn't really matter what happens with Atlanta throughout that stretch, as long as the Mets are the better team over Arizona over this stretch is important. The Mets could have a 2-1 record in their upcoming series against the Milwaukee Brewers, so winning 2 out of 3, and the Diamondbacks losing there that we saw 2 out of 3 in their series against the Royals. Should that happen, the Mets' magic number there is 4. The final time its magic number of 4 is if the Mets are 1-2, but the Diamondbacks are swept against the Royals, which I don't foresee happening. Both are competing for their playoff lives right now. Sadly, the Royals won today against the Nationals, so it would have been better if they lost today, just because it would have added more incentive to their matchup tomorrow beginning against the Atlanta Braves in Atlanta. But regardless, that's the latest on the magic number of 4 for the Mets, would be the scenarios of both Mets wins and Diamondback losses. Now let's get into the magic number of 5, which has to do with Mets wins paired with Braves losses. If the Mets sweep this upcoming weekend schedule and the Braves lose their series against the Royals, they go 1 out of 3, then the Mets are going to be in postseason play. Or if the Mets just win their series going 2 out of 3 and they don't sweep, and the Atlanta Braves are swept by the Kansas City Royals, then that is your situation where it's a magic number of 5 and the Mets are in. So these are current situations right now as how the Mets can get in, from either them paired with Diamondbacks losses or them paired with Braves losses for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. That could help them avoid the doubleheader there in Atlanta, or at least not have to worry about necessarily fighting for your playoff lives leading into that matchup on Monday. And just to reiterate, in case you guys are wondering, are the Mets guaranteed to play these games on Monday? No, they are not. Is it likely going to happen? Yeah, I think it's going to happen. You know, I think we're going to be very fortunate that things fall in the Mets' lap where they clinch before Monday. That would be amazing, but I'm not getting my hopes up on it, nor should you. So, as we evaluate things right now, the kind of common consensus and belief is, okay, these are some options that they have right now that I'm not opposed to, and hopefully, again, the Mets can just find themselves in one of these categories. But then we can go down a much longer list of pretty much every scenario imaginable, and this is what I'm going to rapid fire to each and every one of you. Hello, Wardy Miguel. How are you, my friend? We're almost in postseason. Almost. Keyword is almost there, my friend. The Mets do not have playoffs on lock yet, and even though the Mets officially started their ticket sales for playoffs in which they have not secured playoffs that you guys can purchase as soon as today on Mets shop, Mets.com rather, or wherever you get tickets from if it's an outside source through a third party. Regardless, those are up for sale now, but it's imperative that the Mets make sure they crack postseason play, right? So let's go over each and every possibility on how they can do exactly that starting this Friday. And these are the following scenarios, and I want to give a big shout out to Benjamin Weingarten. Weingarten. I'm butchering this. Okay, there. I kept saying Weingartner for whatever reason, but it's Weingarten, I believe. So Benjamin Weingarten or Weingarten, either one. He tweeted this earlier today saying pretty much this is where we are, but of course I was told there would be no math. Matt's LFGM. Just take a look at this, everybody. I'm going to deep dive every single scenario here, but there's a lot. Like, there's a lot. I don't know if he is the originator of this graphic, but if he is, major shout out to you, Benjamin. Seriously, this takes a lot of time and effort, and that's why I want to give these people their flowers and their kudos for going out of their way to do these things that I simply can't, especially to begin my day when I have other things I'm focused on at the moment. But as we see with the Mets, Diamondbacks, Braves, heading in that doubleheader, here are all the scenarios leading into that doubleheader that would make the Mets crack playoffs. And let's start here with game one, situation one. Path one. Mets sweep, Diamondbacks sweep, Braves sweep, and then the Mets split their doubleheader there. Okay, and why would they crack? Because even though we would see the Braves have the tiebreaker on the Mets would still have the tiebreaker there on the Diamondbacks, and that would be enough. Second scenario, second path. Mets sweep, Diamondbacks sweep, Braves go 2-1, and the Mets split there on the doubleheader. Then there's a bunch of scenarios here in which the Mets would avoid the doubleheader on Monday entirely because of all the following options. Mets sweep, Diamondbacks sweep, Braves go 1-2. Mets sweep, Diamondbacks sweep, Braves go 0-3. This is all for their upcoming series beginning this Friday. Let's not forget that. Mets sweep, Diamondbacks win their series 2 out of 3, and the Braves sweep. Mets sweep, Diamondbacks 2 out of 3, and Braves 2 out of 3. Mets sweep, Diamondbacks 2 out of 3, Braves 1-2. Mets sweep, Diamondbacks 2 out of 3, and Braves are swept. Mets sweep, Diamondbacks lose their series but secure one victory, and Braves sweep. Mets sweep, Diamondbacks lose their series but secure a victory, and Braves take 2 out of 3. Mets sweep, Diamondbacks lose 2 out of 3, and Braves lose 2 out of 3. Mets sweep, Diamondbacks lose 2 out of 3, and Braves are swept. Mets sweep, we see the Diamondbacks swept and the Braves sweep. Mets sweep, Diamondbacks are swept, and the Braves win 2 out of 3 against the Royals. Mets sweep, Diamondbacks are swept, and it's a series loss for Atlanta, but they secure one victory against the Royals. Mets sweep, it's 0-3, another swept job there by the Arizona Diamondbacks, and the Braves are swept. So that alone, I don't know how many I just rattled off, but that's probably 15 to 20 paths right then and there for the Mets to crack postseason play. So that is just a quarter of what I'm about to explain to each and every one of you. And I understand that a lot of this will probably go in one ear and out the other. So all I recommend is, if you guys care about this stuff, slow it down and really deep dive what you think is the most logical scenario, because obviously it goes without saying that with the most logical scenario for the Mets in this specific situation is to just make sure that they win 2 out of 3 against Milwaukee, and then the Braves lose their series against the Royals. You know, it's as simple as that. And if the Diamondbacks lose their series 2 out of 3 there against the San Diego Padres, all fairly realistic things that could happen. win. But even with that being said, that is not a certainty. And that's exactly why we're going over all this. No need to overanalyze it. We can agree to disagree there, Neil, because some people do really care about all these options. The reason why I know this is because I literally saw countless Mets fans this morning interacting with myself on socials and others trying to figure out every single possibility imaginable. Let's see. You're saying there's a chance. Yes, I'm saying there's a chance. And then you have all these possibilities here, right? Mets to just go 2 out of 3, Diamondbacks to sweep, and the Braves to sweep, and then the Mets would have to sweep the doubleheader. Mets would have to win 2 out of 3, Diamondbacks sweep, Braves win it 2 out of 3, but the Mets split the doubleheader. Mets win their series 2 out of 3, Diamondbacks sweep, but the Braves lose their series, and then the Mets split the doubleheader. Mets win their series 2 out of 3, Arizona Diamondbacks sweep, and the Atlanta Braves are swept, so there's no doubleheader. Mets series win, Mets series win, Mets series win, Arizona Diamondbacks series win times 3, but here's the difference with the Atlanta Braves, all leading to still needing a split in the doubleheader, but one scenario has the Braves sweeping, another has them winning 2 out of 3, another has them winning 1 out of 2. Needless to say, we can go on and on and on and on and on, and these are all the different scenarios that you're going to have. I'm not going to rattle them all off, but I did want to relay where you guys can find this information because, again, it does come from this follow specifically on X and Benjamin Weingarten for figuring this out. I don't know how long this took him. Maybe it took him just a couple seconds for all I know. Maybe this guy is a mathematician and always had this kind of orchestrate and figure it out, but just bananas. Absolutely bananas. And this is why the whole title and the whole premise of the show is that the Mets' path to playoffs is insane, because it absolutely is. This has now opened up the floodgates to endless opportunities in which the Mariners can find themselves getting in. There are also opportunities in which the Mets can find themselves not getting in, but there's so many things that seriously need to not happen for the Mets to not crack postseason play. They just have to control their destiny, that we know, take the series against Milwaukee, which we know is a tall task. It's not like it's a guaranteed thing. We're aware of that. However, this Mets team has shown their ability to step up in big series, especially on the road, countless times, mainly in the second half this season. And even in the first half, when they had their early West Coast trip, when they had horrendous baseball in the month of May. It didn't stop them still from having that good road trip to, I think, begin the month of May or so, if I'm not mistaken. Either way, the Mets have endless scenarios in which they could find themselves cracking postseason play, and what we're going to find out now starting this Friday is what exactly is that scenario going to be? What is lining up? Because if the Mets take game 1, and then you see all these other ones, whether the Diamondbacks win or lose, or the Braves win or lose, then we can defer to this specific chart and kind of go from there. Okay, these are the following steps. These are the following things that need to happen. I understand. I'm totally ready to get disappointed. I'll try not to be too upset if it ends. Yeah, it's tough. Don't get me wrong. There's definitely routes where we can be heartbroken in the end, because that's why playoffs isn't a certainty. And that's what I will say about this when it comes to this Mets team. I greatly appreciate every single thing that they have done this season, but I think what went further in hand with my rant on just a couple days ago in their game 1 and faltering 5-1 to the Atlanta Braves had a lot more to do with just not taking advantage of an opportunity after you've really taken advantage of things plenty up until this point, really righting the ship and changing the narrative for what you are as an organization this season. And that's why this stretch beginning tomorrow is so vital, not only for your chance to crack postseason play, but it's time to change the narrative about the Mets. Even in a so-called punt year that some believe heading into the season, it's time to change the narrative. The Mets have done too many great things in the year of 2024, in which there were a lot of bad early on, for them to fall short like this. So that is why I'm emphasizing all these scenarios, because there are fans that desperately care about these just as much as everyone else does. And for all those people that literally take this to heart, I commend you. I'll just say, buckle up. It's going to be a wild ride, but hopefully that ride has the Mets sound safely at the end and not completely dead there because they fell off the roller coaster. So we'll see what happens there, everybody. Next 3 days, I'm a huge Padres fan. Yeah, I am. It's crazy to say, but we're all rooting for the Padres now. 100%, my friend. So we talked there on the latest scenarios. So now let's see. Andy reposted something. Thank you for letting me know that. I appreciate that. I'm actually going to double check here on my phone real quick, and then we're going to continue to break down the latest in Mets land, because we're not only highlighting every scenario path that the Mets could or couldn't make playoffs, but we're also going to be highlighting a complete preview of this Milwaukee Brewers matchup. How are the Mets slated to pitch versus how the Brewers are slated to pitch as of now, and ultimately, what are my current predictions and expectations of the series? What am I most fearful there against the Milwaukee Brewers in particular? And then, yes, we will talk about Chris Sale and why the Mets may still face him should they match up for that doubleheader this Monday. No, I'm not excited about that either, but that is a reality that we currently find ourselves in. Oh yeah, Andy didn't talk about anything notable. It was just him retweeting the latest Baseball Night in NY because they just had their segment. But all right, guys, now let's talk about here what I really want to get into, which has everything to do with this Brewers matchup, because I'm not going to sit here and rattle off the 100 scenarios for you all. I initially debated on it, but then it was a quick reality. I'm like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that because it's going to go through one ear and out the other entirely. So again, check this out if you guys haven't already, and if you're interested and knowing for certain, saving it yourself every scenario in which the Mets would find themselves cracking postseason play. If you couldn't catch on by now, it's a lot. And if I just had to estimate on this graphic alone, it really feels like there's at least like 70. Like it really feels that way. But I digress. Now let's get into everything here on this matchup, because as things currently look, it was announced by the Mets earlier today, Sean Manaea, as we talked about yesterday, will be the Mets' Game 1 starter of this series beginning tomorrow night. Now, Manaea, this has him slated to pitch for the Mets again in the Wild Card Series, Game 2 of the Wild Card Series to be exact. That would find him pitching on Wednesday of next week after getting the start this Friday. Now, should the Mets go with Manaea the way that they are for Friday, who is he going to be facing off against? Well, right now it is slotted to be Frankie Montas there for the Milwaukee Brewers. Montas, who's had success this year for sure, bouncing back from injury that we have seen. He was acquired actually from the Cincinnati Reds around the trade deadline, if I'm not mistaken. Frankie, who made himself known during his time with the Oakland A's. And speaking of the A's, shout out to every single A's fan. I'm thinking of you guys big time today, as it is the final game ever there in the Coliseum. There's no one more selfish and sportsman when we look at ownership than the Fisher family to begin with, and they should be beyond ashamed of themselves. And the fact that they came out with any type of half-ass statement the way that they recently did just continues to show the incompetence that is their ownership, and how much things need to change, and how much I certainly wish that Rob Manfred, who is a puppet of the owners itself, wasn't exactly that and could actually intervene, step in, and make a difference. I realize that's too much to ask for in Major League Baseball, and incompetence at the ownership position. We went through that very well through the many years of the Wilponsian regime, but once more, I'm really thinking about every single A's fan right now. It honestly gets me choked up, because even as someone who didn't have the ability to really appreciate the Oakland A's too much growing up for obvious reasons as an East Coast guy, and as someone who was more engulfed in the Mets more than anything on the baseball end, it's really disheartening to see not only a team but an entire fan base just completely disregarded as if they never existed. And that's really what's felt like that continued treatment year after year after year. So that's all I'll say. I'm not going to go on more of a tangent than that, but I'm thinking of A's, I'm thinking of their fans greatly right now. It is absolutely disgusting what they have to go through, what they're going to have to continue to go through for the next number of years, when there's nothing set in stone on when exactly that they would find themselves playing in Vegas. Right now, everything is in line for them to play in Sacramento for the foreseeable future, and something tells me they're going to have big problems trying to get clearances and everything they want in Vegas when they have a schmuck of an owner who isn't willing to spend to begin with. But maybe I'm crazy. Who knows? We'll find out as time goes on. Now, to reel back into this Milwaukee Brewers-Mets matchup, we have Manaea and Montas there for Game 1. Saturday, we're going to have David Pearson on the bump looking for a big start here, facing off against Colin Ray. Colin Ray is a guy that's been utilized as both a starter and a reliever for the Milwaukee Brewers. And while the Brewers haven't had necessarily the sharpest rotation on paper that we have seen this year, they have done exactly what you expect from a typical Milwaukee Brewers team, even post David Stearns, and that is getting the best out of their pitching, and really utilizing guys well as swingmen, and also getting a lot of multi-inning eaters there out of the bullpen. This is what David Stearns has really prided himself on, and that is smoothly transition to Matt Arnold, who's been at the helm the past couple years there for the Milwaukee Brewers. So Colin Ray, Peterson is your Game 2 matchup. But Game 3, as of now, you're going to have Myers there for the Brewers, and for the Mets, this is still a question mark. You know, if we look through Fangraphs, if we look through expected probable starters, they will tell you Luis Severino. However, I think there's a great reality where Luis Severino potentially doesn't pitch Sunday, and that goes directly in hand with what happens Game 1 and Game 2 for the Mets. That's another thing that we can't forget about this, directly in line with why the Atlanta Braves are being stubborn with Chris Sale right now when they utilize him, is the same reason why the Mets haven't officially announced their rotation beyond Friday night. Depending on if the Mets win or lose and how everything goes with the Atlanta Braves and the Arizona Diamondbacks will dictate the Mets who they potentially throw out there for Game 2. If it's still going to be Peterson, do they consider maybe someone like Tyler McGill, which I think is crazy. I don't think it's going to happen, but just a thought out there, or even for Sunday as well, because McGill is obviously not going to be in your playoff rotation should you crack postseason play and begin the wild card round. So how do you want to go about that? Do you want to sit him on the back burner and just keep him there safe aside should you have that doubleheader on Monday, which is definitely a possibility? There are multiple routes and avenues the Mets can go down to configure their rotation, but if you're asking for my honest opinion, I do think it's in the best interest versus the Mets to probably pitch Jose Quintana on Sunday. Quintana, who has had plenty of success in the past against the Brewers that we know, versus Quintana, who's fared very poorly against the Braves, not only throughout his career, but in Atlanta specifically. I have my level of concern there for a soft-tossing southpaw, and Quintana facing a Brewers lineup versus a Braves lineup. I don't want to down the Brewers at all, because William Contreras, former Atlanta Brave, funny enough, has been leading the charge for that Brewers team that's really been strong this year, both offensively, defensively, pitching. They've been a very well-rounded group, and they're going to have a lot of talk for Manager of the Year this year with their new guy at the helm, who's been in the organization for a number of years, Pat Murphy, whereas the Mets and Carlos Mendoza, it's kind of crazy. Those two guys are leading the way out of the National League, but where's Craig Counsell? It's almost like he was just a byproduct at the end of the day in the Milwaukee Brewers to a degree. I digress. Now, let's get back into a bit more on this specific matchup, because I want to know how you guys feel about this. Do you want the Mets to go down the route of Luis Severino, or do you want them to go down the route of Jose Quintana there for Sunday's game? And I understand you're probably saying, Wardy, I don't have my mind made up yet, because the Mets don't either, right? If the Mets don't have themselves made up as an organization, why should I, when we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow or Saturday? And my response to that is, okay, not a problem. I'm not gonna fault you there. All I'll say is, if you have any thoughts on it, by all means, throw them in the live show and in my replay viewers. Let us know in the comments down below. That'd be greatly appreciated. But let's get into some pros and cons about this matchup, as we're now matching up here against the Milwaukee Brewers, because Milwaukee has been fantastic pretty much all season long. Even after losing Christian Yelich to injury the way that they did, it did not stop their continued success in dominating the NL Central pretty much since the beginning of the season. And Milwaukee absolutely curb stomped the Mets in the beginning of the season, which helped the Mets off to their 0-5 start, including Rhys Hoskins and Jeff McNeil having their little tantrum there at second base, Rhys being a little bitch, backing up in the dugout, and then talking smack the way that he was, and then him single-handedly killing the Mets. I mean, we saw that writing on the wall entirely. But the Mets need to make sure that they avoid that similar matchup here all these months later. I know that this is far from the same Mets team that we saw back in early April. That goes without saying, but still, you have to make a statement in this series against the Milwaukee Brewers, a team that, yes, they might not be playing for as much as we are right now, because they have playoffs securely in place at the moment. Doesn't change the fact that they're likely going to come out hard, and they would love to play spoiler, especially against a Mets team that they have had the upper hand on for the past number of years. And that is an understatement. That's a fact. And when we look at their offense, there's some guys that stand out, not just William Contreras, who's 23 home runs, 92 RBIs, 830 OPS, and a 280 average, has been leading the way as one of the best overall catchers in Major League Baseball. Talk about a lopsided trade there with the Atlanta Braves. Atlanta liked it at first because they got Sean Murphy from the Oakland A's, but a quick reality check is you just trade away a young stud at the catching position. All you need to do is figure out his defense. Milwaukee figures out his defense, and he's one of the best in the game. Then you have Chiriot, their rookie, who's only 20 years of age, so there will be no bubbly for him in the clubhouse for postseason play, even though he'll get it. They're just not going to show you in the public eye, as long as everyone's social media stories are turned off there when they're partying it up. Chiriot, though, 21 home runs, roughly 80 RBIs, 21 stolen bags, 800 OPS, 274 average on the year. He's been fantastic. Sal Frelick has been very strong as well, but he's been more of that contact guy for them for Milwaukee this season. Willy Adames, funny enough, in a contract year, I'm not surprised that he's having one of, if not his best season of his career. 32 home runs, 111 RBIs, 21 stolen bags for the shortstop with 800 OPS, 250 average. That is their Francisco Lindor right there in a lot of ways. And speaking of Lindor, thankfully the Mets should be having him back this series. Rhys Hoskins, who loves to kill the Mets, 25 home runs, 80 RBIs, 720 average, 215 OPS. Poor man's Pete Alonso, but he still knows how to step up, especially against this Mets team. So you got pieces there from Milwaukee for sure. And then on the pitching end, as we talked about certain guys, whether that was going to be guys in Colin Ray, who was second actually on the Brewers this season in strikeouts, a 4.1 ERA and a 1.2 whip on the year there for the right-hander. Thankfully, the Mets do look like they're avoiding Freddie Peralta, which is huge. Freddie is the ace there for the Brewers. He carved up the Mets big time earlier this season that we saw. I believe he won at least 6 or 7 shutty against the Mets back at Citi Field in their first series at home this year, but a 3.68 ERA, 200 strikeouts for him on the year. Myers, who the Mets are slotted to face Sunday as of now, has a very respectable 3.09 ERA in 134 innings, 122 strikeouts for the young right-hander, and this is his rookie year. So there you go. Another great pitching talent that's come out of nowhere here for the Milwaukee Brewers. And funny enough, he was drafted by the Baltimore Orioles. So that was probably a lower level move that Milwaukee did over the past offseason or two that's now worked out brilliantly Frankie Montas with a 4.85 ERA on the season, 146 strikeouts. Mind you, he has split his season between the Reds and the Milwaukee Brewers, so numbers can be a little inflated. He has a slightly better resume right now with the Brewers than the Reds, but you go from a 5 ERA to a 4.5. Not a lot of things have drastically changed there for Montas, who has been a batter's box at times there in the NL Central, not only because he was playing in a batter's box there in Cincinnati all those years, not all those years rather, but this year, but more so just on kind of what the dynamic of what the Central has been this season as well. If it's not dominant pitching, you're seeing, especially in a ballpark as awesome as it is to pitch in Milwaukee, it's also really good to hit. We have noticed this season, and they have definitely barreled Frankie Montas hard that we've seen in the second half still. So that's the latest there on the pitching. So my big takeaway, folks, when we look at the key things to highlight pros and cons of the Milwaukee Brewers series is a pro is that we have David Stearns. David Stearns knows the Milwaukee Brewers better than any other organization. When it comes to crunch time, when it comes to games that matter, I have faith in David Stearns' abilities to have the right mentality for Carlos Mendoza and then to relay that to the entire squad against this Brewers team. Just a couple things to kind of give them the edge a little bit, if you will, just to make sure that they for damn sure secure a series victory. A con I have is that this is a Brewers team that has famously dominated the Mets in Milwaukee for a number of years now. The Mets have not secured a series victory in Milwaukee, and I don't even know how long. Yes, they did clinch playoffs in Milwaukee in 2022, but I don't believe the Mets actually won the series there. I believe they just clinched playoffs. Like, they have played god-awful baseball against the Brewers in Milwaukee for at least the past half decade, if not longer. And, you know, that's one of those things where I understand this is a different Mets team. I shouldn't have the mentality, but until things actually change, I don't know how to feel. So there's natural nervousness and jitters knowing that nothing's guaranteed for the Mets. They're rolling into this with a lot of pressure on their shoulders, chip on their shoulders as well. I think they're going to step up to the expectation a bit here, at least I hope and pray. But against this Brewers team, for them, the Mets, they got to make sure that our rotation is as advertised. You're going to have a lot of tight pitching battles potentially against this Brewers team, and you need to make sure that your bullpen does not get taxed. Because if your bullpen gets taxed and you have to play that doubleheader on Monday, you might as well call wraps and just say the season's over, because the likelihood of things going well that Monday are slim to none should the Mets bullpen get cooked over the next 3 days. So one, we need length from the starters. That is massive. When it comes to not only the sake of Sean Manaea, which I expect starting this Friday, David Pearson needs a nice outing for sure. He's been a little up down as of late, to say the least. And there on Sunday, whether it's Severino or Quintana, whoever starts, if it's not Tyler McGill, for example, you got to get at least 6 strong innings out of these guys. We cannot have another Sevy start of him only going 4 innings. We're absolutely cooked if that's the case. Quintana needs to go a strong 6 at the very least. These are things that really inevitably need to happen for this Mets team to secure a series victory and crack postseason play ultimately. Regardless on what the status of Monday will be, this will help set them up in a right position. So that's what I have to say there on the series right now. I'm really curious how you guys feel about that. Zach Flakerton in the chat says, is Lindor playing or is he going to be DHing? Well, I'll tell you this. If the Mets played their game yesterday, Lindor was going to be starting at the shortstop position. So because of that reason, I'm inclined to believe that Lindor, with 48 hours more days of rest, is going to find himself starting at shortstop this Friday. So until I'm proven otherwise, expect Francisco Lindor to be your batting leadoff starter in the shortstop position this Friday for the Mets, where you know full well the Mets are in control. Milwaukee is not going to play their best players. Mets should sweep. Here's the thing, though. Even if they're not playing their best players, you cannot ever underestimate. Because Neil, I'm going to flip it on you because you're a Braves fan. Braves fans should know this very well if you guys actually follow the Mets intensely enough. The Mets have a tendency to play down to their competition and play up to their competition. When they have key matchups, they have definitely stepped up many times this year. When they've had matchups where it's things were supposed to be a cakewalk, if you will, where things were looking good for them on paper because of the respective schedule, things have not fared all that well for them many times this season. So, again, I'm not here to say, oh, the Mets should sweep. They're going to sweep. I hope they do. I pray they do. I knock on wood that they do. But we cannot view that as anything close to a certainty. This Brewers team could easily mess around and win 2 out of 3 against the Mets. Then the Mets are in a do-or-die situation this Monday, potentially needing either a sweep against the Braves in Atlanta or a doubleheader split at minimum on Monday. And then if you crack postseason play, then you have to fly out to Milwaukee or you have to fly out to San Diego to kickstart your wild card series. Either way, it's not an ideal situation for the Mets to be in right now, but I also know that this is the nature of the beast. When you have a 162, you have poor scheduling placement by everyone around. I'm not going to blame just one person here, and knowing how tight this 3-headed monster of a wild card race is. Brewers have a chance for the 2nd seed. They absolutely do. Mets haven't played up to the Braves yet. Let's keep it a buck. The Mets are 1 game worse than the Atlanta Braves this year in head-to-head matchups. So they haven't really played all that down outside their last game. I agree with that. But it's not like it's been a lopsided affair that we have seen. Like in 2023, it was a lopsided affair because the Mets were shit all 2023. The Braves were healthy. They were good. That's why they dominated the way that they did. The reason why the Braves have almost double the amount of wins as the Mets since the start of the 2017 season has everything to do with the Mets' lack of competence there in the front office, ownership down up until Steve Cohen became owner. And then you have your transition period with new ownership and figuring out who should be hired, who shouldn't be hired. Oh, yeah, that wasn't a good hire because I didn't know at first. Now I understand that, and go on from there. Funny enough, talking about the start of ownership for Steve Cohen, the one common thing was always David Stearns. Steve Cohen wanted David Stearns from as soon as he became owner of the Mets, and the Brewers said no the first offseason to have access to speak to him. Stearns, Mets tried again second offseason. Brewers said no. So what happens? Stearns announces that he's going to be taking a lesser role heading into the third season or so. Then what happens? Stearns announces after a third year of not being able to talk to the Mets or so, he then says, I'm going to be stepping away from the Brewers entirely for the next calendar year. And then the Mets get him. Something that I think about probably way too much is how the Mets would be currently orchestrated if they had David Stearns since the inception of Steve Cohen's ownership. It's something I think about a lot because I know things would be different right now, probably for a greater reason. Even as electric as a year as it's been, I think a lot of money would have been saved. I think just greater and smarter decisions would have been had from the beginning if David was here. But another crazy thing to think about, everybody, if the Mets did hire David Stearns from the beginning, Francisco Lindor probably isn't a New York Met. Yeah, you heard that correctly. Jared Porter didn't do a lot right. He certainly did not have the act for talking to the ladies properly, which is why that schmuck is no longer in baseball. But there's one thing that Jared Porter knew how to do right. It's how to make immediate impact trades as a first-time GM with a big market organization. And that was Francisco Lindor, Carlos Carrasco, for a bunch of no-name prospects who are doing nothing on the Cleveland Guardians organization. The only one who has been impactful is Andres Gimenez, who's been playing great baseball. I'm happy for him, but things have worked out pleasantly for both sides since then. I realize that was a bit of a tangent. I apologize, but I kind of wanted to go on and break that all down. Let's see. I'm sure at some point, Michael, for sure. I mean, I'm very good friends with Mark and James. We talk every single week for the most part. And yeah, they've been very busy with their respective content. That's the other thing too. I've been debating on getting one of Mark or James for a post game for the past number of days now, but I know their schedules have been busy. They attended a lot of the Mets games leading up to the end of the homestand for them. And, you know, my schedule, I don't have as much time as I usually like to plan ahead with certain things either. So either way, hopefully we will collab with them in the near future, either before games are done being had for the Mets, even if that means postseason play, or if that means sometime in the offseason. We'll definitely get conversations going there. Yuki, appreciate the kind words. Thank you so much. But all right, guys, we hit the nail on the head with everything to this point on what you need to know from what the Mets' path to playoffs are, which is simply put a lot of different avenues, a lot of different ways, and it's insane to fathom. The Brewers series preview, we touched to a T everything on that. So let's conclude this discussion with not a positive one, unfortunately, but one that I think we still should be having the discussion, and it has everything to do with Chris Sale. Yes, you heard that correctly, everybody. Listen to this. Justin Toscano, who, for those that don't know, and I actually had the privilege of meeting Justin when I first started Mets coverage. Great guy, met him at Citi Field. He ended up going to the Braves that offseason after Steve Cohen first became Mets owner because he got a more lucrative deal, a more realistic role for him with the Atlanta Braves as their head beat writer versus kind of being a more saturated market here in New York with the Mets, which I commend him completely for going and doing because outside of pure fandom, if you're not a diehard Mets fan, but you're covering the team, you want the best situation for you, right? And he did that by going to Atlanta. And since then, he's been doing great work with the Atlanta Braves, and he had this to say on his latest article, which states the following. The Braves will save Chris Sale for a potential elimination game. They will start Max Fried on Friday, inside the possibilities and scenarios of this final stretch. So to expand on this a little bit further, because Mark Bowman, who looks like a complete thumb of a reporter, Braves fans know that first, literally you'd think that for a guy that has had that photo for the past decade or so, that there would be at least a little bit self-awareness to maybe make a change. Maybe that's me. I don't think I'm being harsh either. Like it's literally like one of the most frequent jokes that I see in Braves Twitter when having to do with their own respective coverage. Braves are going with Max Fried this Friday. TBA for this weekend series. Snicker said Sale is fine when asked for the past 2 days. The question is why push Sale back to Saturday or Sunday when knowing this means the wildcard series could end up without him making a start. Waiting here. So here's the thing. The Braves are risking potentially not utilizing Chris Sale at all in the first round of postseason play, should they make it, to make sure that Chris Sale is available in a elimination game. Yes, you heard that correctly. So let me expand on this a little bit further from the article here. So what's going on with Chris Sale from the piece? The Braves intend to use Sale whenever their season is on the line and they're facing elimination from postseason contention. For example, there is a scenario this weekend where the Braves would face elimination. Sale will pitch. So what does that mean? If the Braves find themselves Saturday or Sunday potentially facing elimination, right? Likely Sunday. I don't see how it'd be Saturday. But if it's Sunday, for example, against the Royals, they're going to make sure Chris Sale starts that day to help eliminate their chances to be eliminated. From there, Sale, the likely NL Cy Young Award winner this year that we know, has been the Braves' best starter this season, and he doesn't mind pitching on extra rest, so that's in part why the Braves are so willing to do this. You know, Sale pitched on July 14th in San Diego, the game heading into the All-Star break, and then he didn't start again until July 25th. And that's, you know what, an 11-day turnaround or so, which is crazy, when he held the Mets to 2 runs over 7 2/3 innings at Citi Field. And that was even at the time a win for the Mets, just to get a couple earned runs on Chris Sale out of almost 8 innings. So for the Mets to face Sale, is it a possibility? Yes. Is it a great possibility? Yeah, if the Mets need to play their doubleheader because it matters for both teams this Monday, we're going to face Chris Sale and Schwellenbach. That's more than likely what's going to happen. And that sucks. That really, really sucks. It's one thing to have to potentially face Schwellenbach again, where I actually have heard there's some pessimism from the Atlanta Braves to want to do this because they don't want the Mets to face Schwellenbach again, because even though we just dominated them, we just saw him. So the same reason why there are Mets fans that are pessimistic about playing Luis Severino Sunday when he just got rocked by the Braves over 4 innings. I understand both sides of the coin there. Braves and their fandom actually have a certain belief of the same regarding Schwellenbach, funny enough, when here I am saying I want nothing to do with Schwellenbach again, because the Mets have faced him twice this year and they have yet to know how to freaking handle him whatsoever. Second straight start, Schwellenbach dominates the Mets of at least 7 strong innings. No, he did not strike out 11 like he did back in the end of July against the Mets. It was only 4 2 nights ago, but he still only allowed 1 earned run and went 7 innings. Like, that's unacceptable from this Mets team, no matter who they're facing. So that's the latest there on Sale. And when we look at other potential starters that the Mets could face in that doubleheader, we also have to bear in mind someone like Ronaldo Lopez. Ronaldo Lopez, who's been out for a bit with injury with his right shoulder inflammation, can be activated whenever the Braves want, basically. So if the Braves do find themselves in dire need of a key doubleheader against the Mets this Monday, they may opt for Ronaldo Lopez if, say, they like that matchup better than, say, for whatever reason, Schwellenbach. Or maybe they had to use Chris Sale on Sunday. Sale isn't available for Monday then, and those games have to be had. Then you go with Schwellenbach and also here and Lopez, which I honestly think is going to be the reality of the situation. I think the Kansas City Royals will win at least one game in Atlanta. I can't guarantee that the Royals are going to win that series. They're both absolutely pushing for their playoff lives, and while I love this Royals team on paper, Atlanta always is going to be a story, is always going to have something to say until the dire ends. So I'm not writing off the Braves whatsoever right now, nor am I disregarding or discrediting the Royals' greatness that they've had in the second half. All thanks to guys like Bobby Witt Jr., Salvador Perez still being younger than what you'd initially think. Tommy Pham, after the Cardinals, said, let's acquire you for a couple days and trade you away because we don't know how to operate as an organization properly whatsoever, doing their best LA Angels impression there. But on the East Coast of things, all I got to say here is that when we look at this Royals-Braves matchup, I obviously hope the Royals win this series. I hope they curb stomp them. I hope they kick their teeth in, but I'm going with the expectation that the Braves are going to win 2 out of 3, and the Mets will need to play that doubleheader on Monday. So before I get out of here, everybody, because we broke down everything to a T there on what's going to happen with Sale, I actually have one final thing I'd like to share from this great piece from our guy Justin Toscano here. Make sure to check him out in case you guys haven't already for his respective piece. For the Braves, the ideal scenario would be to holding Sale and Spencer Schwellenbach for Monday's doubleheader against the Mets, which would likely decide the Braves' fate on cracking playoffs. If the Braves need to win only one of those games, they could start Sale in the first game and hold Schwellenbach for game 1 of the wildcard series. Just like how the Mets could go about potentially not needing to utilize one of their key arms in the doubleheader based on what happens over this weekend. They could start Sale in the first game and hold Schwellenbach to game 1 of the wildcard series. Like Sale, Schwellenbach doesn't mind starting an extra rest, but that is all hypothetical right now. What isn't hypothetical is the big question mark that is the lack of certainty for both the Braves and the Mets and their playoff chances this season. Now, before I let you go, everybody, let me answer a couple comments, questions you guys got for me. Outside of that, though, thank you all so much for taking the time to smash that like and subscribe button if you haven't already. Greatly appreciate it, as we always break down the latest in Mets land. And tonight, we had ourselves a nice discussion, a lengthy one, on all the latest going on between the two, their respective schedules, and how the Mets can try to crack postseason play. That's going to happen. Yes, Michael, I did talk to her about that. And yes, she's excited about that. We're all hoping and praying that the Mets can just get the job done there in Milwaukee. Go Lugo. Yep, we're rooting for Seth Lugo big time against the Atlanta Braves. And Lugo has had plenty of success against Atlanta. So hopefully we see a continuation of exactly that. Now that he's basically a Cy Young caliber starter there with Kansas City. And great for him. Seriously. Let's see. It doesn't matter who we face. No weapon formed against us shall prosper. Eugene, I don't know what you're smoking, but pass it over here because you got me hyped up and ready to run through a brick wall. My goodness, my God, my gracious. Let's see. Sale gave up 2 earned runs in his last start and struck out 6. Okay. Again, if the Mets face Sale and they score 2 runs on him in 6 top 7 innings, I'm counting that as a win as long as we handle our own on the pitching end. That's the big thing. I just want to see the Mets be afloat if they have to face Sale. Like, I truly have more pessimism facing Schwellenbach right now. I know Sale's a dog. He absolutely is. But this team has not figured out Schwellenbach even to the degree that they figured out Sale in their first matchup against him this season. Why? Because the Mets have actually had more success against lefty pitching this year than they have since the start of Steve Cohen's ownership. And I don't believe I'm lying when I say that. If we look at the numbers and we look at how the past couple of years have went, the Mets have been absolutely god-awful in handling lefty pitching. Now, I kind of like how they stack up along with a lot of other teams in the National League this year. Even if you are as disgusting, as dominant, and as special and as unique as Chris Sale is. Mets can't let that dirtbag Rhys Hoskins have a big series. I couldn't agree more, Sanders. I couldn't agree more. Ronaldo Lopez hit the table us twice this year. He's a walking injury. I mean, that's what happens when you stretch a reliever into a starter. But let's commend the Braves for what they did. They literally got a reliever in the Angels last year, and what was a perfect trade for them. Just like when they trade for Raisel Iglesias for nothing a couple years ago, because the Braves literally get freebies from Perry and the Anaheim Angels because he was initially with the Atlanta Braves. So there's always that connection going on there between himself and AA. They're literally like BFFs from the way that they trade, the way that the Braves fleece them every time, like they did with the latest trade where they got Jesse Chavez and was it Tucker Davidson back, like that. Just ridiculous. But regardless, let's reel back in here for a second. Wardy, what do you think happens? How do the Mets get in your opinion? In my opinion, I think the Mets get in playoffs, God willing. God willing. I think the Mets get in playoffs if they have to win one game at least on Monday. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't have this optimism level that the Mets are going to roll in there this weekend and completely clinch. I hope things work in their favor, outside factors that they don't control with other teams and the Braves and the Diamondbacks, but I'm going with the thought process now that Monday's going to matter. And I think you guys should too, because that way, if it doesn't, it's perfect. It's something you don't got to stress out about. Stress out about it for now if you want, for sure. And then hopefully we find out by Sunday evening that, oh, we don't got to worry about that. It's okay. Monday ain't going to happen. We're in postseason play. Everyone's happy. Let's just get set to face the Padres or the Brewers to kickstart playoffs. That should be the focus, hopefully. But that's what I have to say about that. Why I answered that already. There was one other point I did want to make earlier, but I'm blanking on. Why am I worried about this weekend? Why should I get my hopes up? John, if it makes you feel any better, if you're just chiming in now, I just broke down to a T the past hour, the first segment of our show, all the paths for the Mets to make playoffs. And there's like 70 plus of them. I'm not even joking. It's an insane amount, which is why the title is the way that is. The Mets' path to playoffs is insane because it can happen pretty quickly or the next couple days in awesome fashion, or it can happen terribly where they have to grind their ass all the way till the very end and nothing comes easy. And that is what things not even being a guarantee. So with that being said, everybody, that is about going to wrap up the live show. We do have some D-backs talk. And yes, we talked about all those scenarios, Glizzy in the chat. Literally every single scenario that can happen with the Mets, we showcased and we broke down here in the live show. So, guys and gals, that is going to do it for our latest New York Metropolitan coverage here. Thank you all so much for watching live and our replay. I greatly appreciate it. On your way out, please make sure to smash that like and subscribe button. Let me know your biggest takeaways in the comments down below, as that is always appreciated. And as always, thank you all so much for chiming in, as we will be be back live tomorrow, barring changes of any breaking news topics or something like that. We will be live for pregame coverage at least an hour, if not earlier, before the game starts. And then we will also have postgame coverage as soon as the Mets hopefully kick the teeth in on the Brewers and take game one of that matchup. Until then, have a fantastic rest of your night, day, evening, whenever you're watching this, everybody. And I'm going to leave you with what I promised earlier, and that's letting it rip with the one, the only WardyNYM postgame jingle.